Hello, and welcome to the British Cartographic Society's Teatime Talk series. My name is Chris Tributus, the coordinator for the Teatime Talks, and I will be the chair for today's talk. This series aims to offer a broad and wide range of short talks on topics that will be of interest to the community. Today we have a talk from Philip Deller. Phil is a GIS professional who has worked in the geospatial data industry for 25 years. His current role is Technical Director at GeoMini UK, where he is responsible for all production and maintenance of GeoMini UK's spatial databases. He also leads the product development and R&D activities, as well as participating on bespoke customer and staff training. Today's talk discusses how Stansted Airport have modernised their mapping. Stansted Airport, over many years, has increased its capacity and ability to handle larger and larger volumes of aircraft and people traffic. Under its new owners, the Manchester Airports Group, they have been looking to modernise not only their operational procedures, but also their behind-the-scenes airside operations. After being approached by the airside operations team with 2 large paper maps in hand and asking if it was possible to create new current versions, the challenge was set. Dragging them into the world of GIS and creating a spatial database that they could maintain themselves and use across many other operational groups was the plan, but in the end they just wanted an update of the same paper maps. I will now pass you over to Phil.
Okay, so let's dive in. Thank you very much for inviting me to come, actually. That's the first thing I should say. Hopefully you'll find this interesting. So a bit of a brief history about Stansted Airport, just to sort of set some scenes for you in the short term. Runway, first constructed by USAF, actually 1942, but more interestingly, I think probably on D-Day, 600 aircraft left for the beaches of occupied France out of Stansted Airport. So it's got a good history, shall we say. It served its purpose well. And then BAA as an organisation, they were formed and they took control in 1966. So that's when it became a more of an airport as we know it today. But obviously, it's gone through several phases of major extensions and renovations and expansions over the years, and some minor ones in between, that take us pretty much up to modern day, where eventually, in more recent times, the Manchester Airports Group took control, and that was in 2013, which is an important date, so just remember that, because I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, they purchased for an alleged £1.5 billion, which arguably is cheap for an airport, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe in modern times today, in a pandemic, they're probably thinking that's not a good return on their investment, but who knows? Maybe in the long run it will work out for them. So they now own the airport and operate the airport. So their history of maps. Now, we don't know too much about all of their mapping that they've got, but we know that they had in 2012, note 1 year before Manchester Airports Group took control, the blue map and the green map, which I'll show you and talk about a little bit more in a minute. But that's what they refer to them as, that's what they call them. They don't really have proper titles, which is one of the first issues. But in addition to the blue map and the green map, through the relationship that we've had with them when we were part of the Geoinformation Group, a series of aerial surveys starting back in 1999. We've done an aerial survey for them. Back then it would have been around 25 centimetre resolution from film-based cameras, and it's moved through the digital era, producing data at higher resolution year on year, doing new aerial surveys. Up until the recent day, Manchester Airports took control and they started to do less aerial surveys as imagery is more available from other sources as well. Perhaps you don't need your own one, but they've ended up with, I think the last ones being 2018, that they've actually taken from us. So they've got a good archive of aerial surveys, which puts them in a good position for maintaining and updating maps. But what about these maps? Let's have a look at them first of all. Now, are you ready? This is the blue map. This is what they refer to as the blue map. Yes, it's a map. It's a functional map. It gives some information about where stuff is, but to me, it's lacking quite a few standard cartographic items. A title would be quite nice, a scale bar, some kind of legend to tell us what are we looking at. What is the difference between this grey area here and this light buffed area here? I don't know. There's nothing on there to tell us. And why are these important? Why are they listed? Not really sure. But it's their blue map. I don't know how they used it or what they used it for. I've never seen it in a public environment, but it was one of the things they came to us. It's kind of secondary, though, to the green map. Now, are you ready for this one? This is their green map. Again, missing a title. It's got a north arrow on it, so we know it's not pointing in the right direction, but the north is pointing in the right direction, but the map is orientated slightly off. Created in September 2012, and they came to us literally with these two maps in paper and said, these are our maps that we use. What do you use this for? What's it telling us? What's it representing? And just look down the runway for a minute. You can see, hopefully you can see these are divided into blocks and they're numbered. So that's block number 1, block number 2, block 3, 4. And they are the maintenance blocks that the maintenance team use to help determine where they need to provide maintenance services onto. And there are all the stand numbers in here recorded. All of the aprons are recorded. The key buildings are labelled. It's got perimeter fence written around here. Some of the hangars are mentioned. There's a lot of information, but even phone numbers for people who obviously take this map out into the field with them, the field being the airfield, so they can contact people should they need them. And that's pretty much how they used it. This was printed out and people took it with them where they needed to go. It exists as an A3 printout on the back of everyone's desks behind their computers that they work at. I was told it does exist in a PDF form, but the people we dealt with didn't really know who had created it or where that PDF might exist. So we were not given very much information to start with about how to update these maps, what they wanted, or was there a digital version of them in the first place. So as we said at the beginning, the challenge was set. So how do you go about updating a map that you haven't got in the first place? So really, you've got to start again and try and recreate the map. Luckily, there's a big arsenal of aerial surveys. This is one from, I think it's the 99 one, and it shows the imagery that was taken at that time, summer of 99. Car parking down here, it looks familiar to what we're looking at on the blue map. You can see all the detail. And if I flick further forward into, I think, the 2018 survey, the car park has grown. There's lots of change going on. So yeah, there's a lot of development work that has taken place. And we knew that, we saw that in the history of Stansted Airport. There's lots of things that have developed and taken place and changed. So have a little look at some of the extra detail in there. The car park, going back to the 1999 survey, looks pretty full. So there was a reason, obviously, why they needed to extend it. But how much did they extend it by? Quite a lot. A lot of extra car parking has been built, of which I can chuck in my fun fact about Stansted Airport car parks. And you have to make sure you get this right. It's a bit of a tongue twister. The largest single-story hard-standing car park in Europe. There we go. You can have that one on me. That's a fun fact of Stansted Airport. There's not that many. And if we look at a different area, look back up to the northeast corner again, I'm a bit car park obsessed. There's car parking in here, which actually that's gone. They've put a building on it, so they're taking away car parks. But if we go back to the 2000 or forward to the 2018, they've built more car parks. So they've actually built more buildings, more car parking, and all this area, if I go back, has gone to the previous one, go forward again. So they've extended the airport capability. The number of passengers is going up all the time, and their new owners are targeting to get more and more passengers in. And you can even see, if I go back here, you can see the runway clearly stops here, and they've got some landing lights and various things on the approach here. And if I go forward again, well, there's a bit of a mark on the ground there where they're starting to scope out the potential for this runway extension. So they've been thinking about it for a while, the extra runway and what that really means, or extending the runway. So there you can see the development path of the airport. So we've got good aerial surveys. So we picked the most recent one, obviously, and start to capture the information. And here we have a snapshot from the data capture environment that we're collecting the data in. And we started to draw all of the information. And the general rule was, if you can see it, you can map it. So we captured everything that we can see at that level. And when I say level, that's the ground. These blue features that are starting to come in down here, they're what we term to be in another layer, in the overlay layer, if you like, because they're not attached to the ground. And in addition to that, we've got all of the airside markings, of which there's an awful lot. All of these have been captured and digitized. So effectively, we're able to start attributing some of this information, these polygons, these entities in the database. I'll use the database term a lot shortly, and start to build up a catalogue of information, which allows us to apply some styles to it. Here it is styled up in our GIS, showing the land cover information, the basic buildings, the grass, the trees, and there's water obviously in there as well, with the airside markings layer and the overlay layer drawn, so we can see everything at once. So turning this into a map is something that we can think about, but actually what we've actually done is built a database, a spatial database, with lots of information and therefore lots of capacity for use. So going back to our area that we were just looking at, got the airside markings, and each one of these has a different name and a different purpose. These arrows have a name. They're a particular thing. This curve is representing the join between this taxiway and the apron. So that has a name in aviation world. These features here, which you mustn't go over with certain aircraft, have a name. So every entity in the database is named and subsequently numbered. And again, for these airside, these overlay features as well, again, they're all labeled, named, numbered, and built into a database. So what we've created for them was a multi-layered polygon data set covering lots of different features with lots of different applications to it. And we started to talk to them about how they might use this database. And then they said, well, what about the points? And we said, points? What points? Well, every runway has loads of runway lights on it. And there are lots of point features all over an airport, which I didn't really appreciate until we started to do this. So by default, we started to create another layer, which is all of the point features. And again, every one of these is numbered, named, given the use, all the information needed, including things like, I forget the name, I think they're called power takeoffs, where the aircraft rest on their stand. They have to plug into somewhere to recharge their batteries. You'd may be surprised to hear that, but that's a feature and a point feature in the database that we've created. So now we've got multiple layers, we've got a relational database, everything's labeled, linked together, and they've got much more than just the green map and the blue map, potentially. But because of all these features, we needed to understand a bit more about them and what they were, so we knew what we were actually looking at, so we know how to code them. We're not from the aviation industry, we're geospatial people. So that involved a few trips to the airport where I was given access to go round with someone relevant from the airside team who could take me around and tell me what some of these features were. So it would help us build up the database. We took some videos going around the different areas, decided to work out how to handle mapping these sorts of stepped changes that we've got in the database. What are some of these features and how they want them coded? When do they want them captured and when not? What's actually a permanent feature in these busy areas and which ones aren't? So we learned quite a lot from doing that exercise. Took all that away to help build up the database, which left us with this product that they've got lots of different applications for. So I'm just going to whiz through some of these different styles of the data, if you like, of how they might be able to use it. This is it referring back to those maintenance blocks, which I drew your attention to at the very beginning. Maintenance block 1 on the runway, block 2, and on the different taxiways. So there is an application here already about how they can use this data to help plan their maintenance. And you might think that's quite a big area to consider for maintenance. Well, just more for your information, each one of these blocks is divided into much smaller tiles. So there's a hierarchy of maintenance areas. So they might say tile number 12 in block number 23 on Juliet taxiway might be something that they use. So they've now got this all in a database that's spatial, which is great. So it's got good applications. Here it is again, I'm just highlighting the Juliet taxiway, which again is a single entity in the database that can be labeled, made up of many smaller entities, so it's relational. And here's the Bravo apron and stand number 33. So now you're starting to think, actually, you can use this database for navigation, airside navigation. If an aircraft, or any vehicle in fact, because not only aircraft move around, have to get out of stand 33 through Bravo apron onto Juliet taxiway in order to get to the runway, this database has got potential to help plan that navigation as well, or to be used in a navigation aspect. Everything in here is labeled with that in mind, so it gave them complete flexibility of how to use it. So again, the opportunities of, or the uses of this database are growing all the time. This is an area looking at the old part of the airfield, the original Stansted that was used by the RAF. And here it is highlighting some areas that they've got different priorities on for different maintenance or development, or they have to apply for different rules on for different things. So, and it just shows you the flexibility of the database. I don't even know what these are representing, but they asked us to put these areas and number them in this way. So there could be all sorts of things going on. And there's this sorts of activity another table in the database that reflects how it can be used. All different applications. So it becomes a really powerful tool. Even more powerful, looking at the road network. They started to recognize the fact that we could create attribution in a database that says, okay, well, this is a roundabout, this is a dual carriageway, this is an off-ramp, and actually take it to another level and apply their results of their pavement condition scores that they do. They have to maintain this. This is private land. So these roads that the public go on have to be maintained to the local authority standards. And for that, there are certain legislations that they have to go through to make sure they are maintained correctly. How do they record all of that? Well, they record that in a database. Well, why not link it to the spatial database? So again, this suddenly has gone from being can you update my map to building a spatial database. So let's just list some of these uses out, or users of. Obviously, the airside maintenance, they were the people that came to us in the first place. And there's all sorts of airside buildings, and they use it for that, and the runway navigation side of stuff as well is all used. But this database has potential to be able to be used in these applications. Car parking, we mentioned that. That's how that's grown, how that changes, how that adapts to different things that are going on, whether it's for coach parking, car rental returns. I mean, there's all sorts of logistics, I should think, around the car parking that make it very difficult. Hopefully this database provides some tools into that as well. And then the general road infrastructure, as we've just seen, planning the road network, the maintenance of the road network, the upkeep, what changes they might need to make going forward, as well as the general grounds maintenance. So what do I mean by that? Well, we saw on that original green map, all of the areas of grass have got numbered zones on them as well. So each patch of grass has got its own unique area value. Therefore, when it comes to awarding a third-party grounds maintenance contractor to come in to cut the grass, I'm sure they do a lot more than just cut the grass, but they know exactly how many square meters they've got to deal with. So they can go out to tender and use this information for quoting. So it's not limitless, but there's a lot of applications around this spatial database. So this is what they've got, and here it is in your desktop GIS. But ultimately, they still wanted us to recreate these maps. So how do we turn this spatial database into a cartographic product? Well, the first thing is obviously this is Stansted, and it's north orientated in that direction, which isn't reflective of the green map. So by applying a rotation to the canvas in our desktop GIS, we can spin it back around quite easily. So thank you for the application to being able to do that. And in applying the right layers, styles, we can start to make it look a bit like the mapping that we had. And we played around with the colors to try and get them right, and had a few backwards and forwards iterations with them before they chose and were happy with what we've done, before we moved to the next phase of starting to make it look more like a cartographic product, of which that requires some extra symbology, which we had to design and build and find and bring into the product and scale and build all the map marginalia and everything else that goes with that alongside it. So here's our original starting green map, and that has resulted in something that has now got a scale bar and a title, but it's still got the boxes of text information that they wanted. But it's now a digital, maintainable product they can have. And actually that gives them a lot more flexibility. So I was imagining they're going to have all of their airside team are going to have iPads, or other tablets are available, and they can have this on there and they can annotate on top of it and take it into the field, and they can record their tasks and their maintenance, or where they want to change, or if they've got to move a fence or something, and do it that way. So you can imagine my surprise returning back to the airfield to find no tablets, nothing digital, and instead a revised printout of my new green map behind people's desks, and engineers walking around with paper copies of this map. So they've got this lovely spatial database, but they just use it as a map. And the blue map, there's our original blue map. We didn't pay too much attention to the blue map, if I'm perfectly honest, because the green map was definitely the focus, but we gave them a revised, refreshed version of it. But it's not really what I would call a product at this stage. It's more a mimicking version of the old one. However, there is perhaps light at the end of this tunnel that is refreshing. They have now an online presence, and I won't click on it now because it will link to another database, but this is online for the public to go and have a look at, and they can zoom in and have a look around. But there's nothing out here to go and see. It's all over here, and the sorts of information they get now is actually what the public want. This is where is Costa Coffee inside the terminal building. That tends to be the main thing people want to know. and they can use it. I believe from talking to them that they are looking at creating an internal version of this for the airside operations team that will have the information that we created in there, so that the airside team can log in and go and have a look at this electronically as well. So they have now perhaps gone through their phase of updating the maps and getting a spatial database, and might be starting to use it. However, going forward, or looking back slightly into the summer that's just gone, just to conclude this, Stansted Airport new aerial survey 2020, taken during a global pandemic, makes it look very, very different. So our very busy car park that was full of cars before is now pretty empty, apart from the shuttle buses that are all parked up because no one's travelling, no one's needing to be shuttled from a car park to the terminal building. So all of those pink elephant buses, if you've been to Stansted Airport, they're all parked up waiting for it to be opened up again. And I've never seen an airport with so many aircraft parked up, ever. And I don't think we ever will again once we've got through this other side. There's 1 or 2 spaces where aircraft are out doing their flights to keep their hours up, otherwise they lose their airworthiness certificates, and the pilots are all fighting over getting control, otherwise they lose their hours. And the only other real use that they've got, turned one of the car parks into a COVID testing centre. So in May, during the height of the pandemic, Stansted Airport had become one of the testing centres. So I just thought I'd leave those images for you just to conclude. We'll end back on the green map, and thank you very much for listening. I think it's over to the Q&A if anyone's got any questions. I'll have a look and see. I'm just seeing if there's any questions. No questions.
Thank you very much, Phil. Yes, we already have one question. I think someone put their hand up in the middle as well. So question 1. The saying that every cloud has a silver lining. What has been easier for you to do, if anything, during COVID-19?
Well, as you saw, no one was flying. So the southeast of England, for conducting aerial surveys during the summer, has been described in the past as flying around in shark-infested custard because of so many aircraft. And the air traffic controllers who have to operate and navigate their way through the permissions of people applying to aircraft are under a lot of pressure, and they do a fantastic job. Traditionally, survey aircraft are rated level Z. If you were to think of an emergency aircraft as A's and B's and C's, and commercial airliners, survey aircraft are given the lowest priority. So we find it very, very hard to get in to fly. During a global pandemic, the skies were pretty much open. There has never been as much photography captured in 1 year. In the years I've been working in this industry, we've done more photography. Not we personally, but as a survey industry, there has been so much photography captured this year. It's unprecedented. So that's made life a lot easier for the air survey industry, certainly.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting outcome that we have at the moment. Does anyone else have a question? That I can see that we have some people raising their hand. If you could type, it would be a bit easier for us to just line these questions up.
Yeah, just in case anyone's struggling to find the Q&A thing, there in the top right-hand corner of the screen, there's a triangle, circle, and a square, and then you'll see an option for Q&A, and then you can press the Q&A and type your question in there.
Yes, and here we have our next question. So the next question is this the usual sort of mapping that you do?
No, to be honest, no, it's not. The principles of how we've mapped this data and created this database fall back from some of the other spatial databases that we have, where the data capture environment that we use and the sort of features that we cap, the level of detail that we capture it at, and building a database. The byproduct that's come out the back of this, which is these maps, the cartographic front, that's not normally what we get involved in. No, we have been traditionally in the past involved in creating data captures team, basically capturing data, digitizing data, building a database up, and that is of various other things. Stansted mapping project has been built off the back of those skills.
Okay. Okay, the next question we have is, how did you map the internal layout?
The internal layout being, if you're referring to that example I showed you where the 3D image of the terminal building. So we haven't. That's what they've now done post us doing those updates to the mapping. So that's something the Manchester Airports group have either commissioned themselves or done independently. But that's so that we haven't got involved with that. Internal, if you mean internal airside, how did I get airside? Well, you have to go through a series of permissions and getting passes, clearance. You'd be surprised how difficult that is. There's a lot of security, as you would imagine, around getting airside. And there are certain areas, if you crossed over a line, you've technically left the country, so you have to be quarantined before you come back in again. And there's under strict control not to go too far, although it was a lot of fun driving around the airfield. But.
And very interesting, that one there. So, yes, another one. Has anyone shown any interest in a 3D model of the airport? And could you make one from the geodatabase?
So depends what you mean by 3D. There is the ability to attribute the building polygons, for example, with building heights, which you could do from photogrammetry or from airborne LiDAR if you were to capture it that way. You could create, and people have done, and sort of three-dimensional mesh models across the airfield from the overlapping stereo imagery. There's definitely been interest in people creating 3D models of airports, and actually there's more. It's an easier route to do it from driving around a vehicle with a fixed LiDAR on its roof to collect the information that way. So create a point cloud from the ground, because access over an airfield to do an aerial survey to do that type of level is obviously tricky because of the activity that goes on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and now, okay, another one again. So we've got, I noticed that on the digitized polygons shown early in your talk, the planes were not digitized. Explain how they were not captured.
So we've captured. I mean, explain why they were not captured. I think that's what I'm talking. Yeah, because they wanted a map to show what the fixed features were in the airfield. So there are some features, many, including aircraft and other vehicles, that move around clearly, and they need to create an asset list of what's inside the airfield and what they own. And when they don't own the aircraft, remember, so different aerial companies lease those, presumably from finance companies, I would imagine, and the aircraft are coming and going all the time. Now, yeah, I admit that would look really nice as a cartographic product if you were to put an aircraft, map every aircraft on there, but I think that would distract from its use as a spatial database if you were to start mapping the aircraft.
Again, thank you very much for that answer. Okay, did the project involve maintenance areas like the terminal interior was mapped?
Maintenance areas as in everything external. So we didn't, for this update to this green map and blue map, let's focus on the green map again, nothing internal has been mapped. So there are lots of hangars and storage areas and maintenance areas that were not mapped by us, but they are at some level exist in some forms. I mean, the terminal building is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
that was correct.
The exterior maintenance areas. So I'm just reading that question again. The exterior maintenance areas have a lot, which is why I went and the team went and had a look around the airfield to understand what those features were. The maintenance team use a lot of the exterior areas as their sort of storage areas, so they've got everything to hand when they need it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. So So another one again. How was the actualization of the data being handled? Well, how is the actualization of the data being handled?
What do we mean by that? Sorry, that's a good question.
Do you have any clarification on that one?
We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that one. If you just clarify exactly what you mean, and answer it as soon as
Yeah.
as soon as we have that. Okay, so what else are you working on at the moment? Another talk in 6 months, maybe?
Yeah, happy to come back and do some more talks. Yeah. If I can find something, there's lots of projects and things going on. So if there's something that I think is interesting and I'm invited back, then I'll be more than happy to come back to it.
And we'll be happy to have you back. Okay, one more. Being a former Geomini maps user, I see a lot has been a lot has been put into the maps. How was the interactive map handed over to the authority in terms of platform?
Okay, so yeah, it's an Esri-based platform or environment that we've captured all the data in. So we've created for them a geodatabase of all of these layers and created that back to them, as well as providing as part of that the relevant style files embedded into that geodatabase. And they're pretty much an Esri house, the Manchester Airports group. So.
Okay. And we have a clarification on that question from earlier. Has the staff been trained in GIS skills to update the data and add extra attribution?
Stansted Airport staff, there was a GIS team of one, and he had a copy of CAD Core on his laptop. So no, but the Manchester Airports team, who are not based actually at Stansted, based up in Manchester, well enough, they have a whole GIS division which are familiar with Esri and its operational procedures. And I think they've recently changed to ArcGIS Pro and AGOL accounts as well. So yeah, they have the ability to do that. As long as they joined up their resource and got access to these aerial surveys that they have and keep those up to date or take up to date feeds of aerial imagery, then they are in a position to be able to maintain it themselves. Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I want to thank Phil for an interesting talk, and I hope that you'll join us for future talks. Our next talk will be from Ed Beddoes at GISE, where he'll talk about the power of cartography and how it drives positive change. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you and goodbye.